a 6.5 magnitude earthquake over near the Californian coast. Now, it comes north of San Francisco, and luckily, this has been off the coast, out at sea, and hasn't hit any residential areas or anything like that. There's no tsunami warnings, so thankfully, a bullet dodged here, because if it had been in a built-up area, who knows what kind of damage may have been done, what injuries would have ensued, possible loss of life. But I can tell you, thankfully, there's no reports of that coming in at the moment. So let's take a closer look at this, in my opinion, really sizable earthquake on the Californian coast on the eastern side of the Ring of Fire. Now here we see the eastern side of the Ring of Fire. Here is the quake. It's been reported by USGS that it's a 6.5 magnitude, despite it initially being reported as a 6.8, and it comes 160 kilometres west of Ferndale. Now, it's at a depth of 12.1 kilometres. Now, that's quite interesting, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But let's look at some of the newspaper reports for this now. The real news, as they call themselves, not fake news like me here. And we'll get into that tonight on the show. But it says here on the Los Angeles Times, a powerful magnitude 6.5 earthquake rocked the Northern California coast Thursday morning. Now, I can tell you it happened about just over an hour ago. It's 4 p.m. here in the UK. It was early morning over on the west coast of America. It says the quake occurred about 100 miles off the coast of Eureka around 6:50 a.m. There were no immediate reports of injuries or damage. The depth of the quake was about 6.21 miles. Now that's key as well. According to the USGS, which issued no tsunami warnings in connection with the tremor. Now, the reason I'm saying this is key, the 6.21, the 12.1 kilometres, if we come to the report on Russia Today, we see here that it was initially reported as 10 kilometres deep, 6.2 miles, or 6.21 miles deep. That is how deep it would be. And the reason, and I keep going back to this, I keep harping on about this, and it's a deliberate pun, because 10 kilometres and 6.21 miles just happens to be the signature move or the signature depth for HAARP to operate at. What is HAARP? Some of the new listeners are saying, well, you're going to go down a rabbit hole once you look into HAARP. It's one of the first things I ever stumbled upon. And it says here, quote, "It isn't just conspiracy theorists who are concerned about HAARP. The European Union called the project a global concern and passed a resolution calling for more information on its health and environmental risks. Despite those concerns, officials at HAARP insist the project is nothing more sinister than a radio science research facility." And that comes from CBC, and that's in Canada. Now, HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, and researchers like myself and millions of others around the planet believe that it can be used to generate man-made earthquakes. It can be used to geoengineer. It's all part of the same chemtrailing programs that we see picture after picture of from around the globe. Now, it says here from Global Research, this is printed back in 2010 but still holds true today. HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, is a little known yet critically important US military defense program which has generated quite a lot of controversy over the years in certain circles. Though denied by HAARP officials, some respected researchers allege that secret electromagnetic warfare capabilities of HAARP are designed to forward the US military's stated goal of achieving full spectrum dominance by the year 2020. Others go so far as to claim that HAARP can be used for weather modification to cause earthquakes and tsunamis, to disrupt global communication systems, and more. Coming further down here, it says the HAARP website even acknowledges that experiments are conducted which use electromagnetic frequencies to fire pulsed, directed energy beams in order to temporarily excite a limited area of the ionosphere. Some scientists state that purposefully disturbing the sensitive layer could have major and even disastrous consequences. Concerned HAARP researchers like Dr. Michael Chuzadovsky of the University of Ottawa and Alaska's Dr. Nick Begich, the son of a US congressman, present evidence suggesting that these disturbances can even cause tsunamis and earthquakes. So let's stop there. And here's a small picture of the HAARP array. And we have been lucky enough over on the Kev Baker Show to speak to one of the antenna men, the riggers, who put up the first quadrupole antenna up on the actual site for HAARP. Now, Billy Hayes joined the Kev Baker Show along with Ilana Freeland, and they were talking about this full spectrum dominance by the year 2020. We also have something called the space fence now, which is basically HAARP, which has been digitized. And when we're talking here about them using high energy beams to bounce off the ionosphere, when it comes to the generation of these earthquakes, what I'm putting forward here is by bouncing that high energy beam, they're able to target specific areas of the planet, and they will stimulate and heat up the rock and the kind of underneath the ground at a depth of 10 kilometers. Now, that heating of the rock, it starts to build up stress, and eventually that stress wants to release, and it releases in the form of an earthquake. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of this up right now is because there really is so many of these earthquakes happening at this depth. It seems to be picking up pace. And where it was before with HAARP used to use the ionosphere, because we now live in our atmosphere has been changed, the air all around us is now ionized, they can use anywhere in the atmosphere, in the sky, to generate these effects. Now, that might sound a bit way out there, but by using satellites along with ionospheric heaters, this is the world we now live in. All of these chemtrails, even the wind farms, the turbines as they turn round, discharging positive ions into the atmosphere. And that ionosphere they used to use, well, basically the ionosphere is everywhere now. They can use that effect. They don't have to hit it right up into the atmosphere, and they can generate earthquakes. Now, a lot of people out there are going to point to CERN. Oh, CERN must be to blame. It's the new toy in town. And I'll admit to you, when I first started looking into CERN, I thought that as well. And for new listeners, CERN is the Large Hadron Collider situated over in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, a lot of YouTubers will say that all the earthquakes nowadays are down to CERN, the Awake Machine, the Linear Accelerator, Strangelets, quark gluons. But I've been very lucky to have formed a relationship with Mr. Anthony Patch. Now, he was on Clyde Lewis last night. He's also got his own show now over on Truth Frequency Radio on a Friday night at 8 p.m. in the UK, and that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, and that's noon on the West Coast, and that's truthfrequencyradio.com, the Anthony Patch Show. Now, he, like me, when it comes to earth changes, definitely would say there's more likelihood that if they are man-made, or if we are having an effect on them, it's HAARP as opposed to CERN. Now, CERN does produce absolutely masses of electromagnetic energy. However, when it comes to the generation and propagation of man-made earthquakes, HAARP, and all the other ionospheric heaters around the world, that is one of their best purposes. It's what it's designed for. Now, I'm going to play a clip here from Anthony. He joined us on Freaky Friday after his debut show just a fortnight ago, and we were getting into all the large quakes in New Zealand, around Japan, all these quakes that had been going off, picking up in intensity. And like I say, people say that when earth changes pick up, they start looking towards CERN. What is CERN doing? Well, I'm going to let you listen to what Anthony had to say about that, And I'll let you decide. Is it a man-made earthquake via CERN? Is it an earthquake via HAARP? Is it just natural? What kind of earth changes are we going through right now? And why are they picking up? That's all for you to decide, but take a listen to this. But Tony, I want to come to you first of all, right? Because whenever now there is a big earthquake, on YouTube and various other places on the internet, people seem to be, rightly or wrongly, we'll get your opinion on this in a second, attributing these quakes and a whole host of other things to CERN and the switching on of the Awake Plasma Accelerator. Now, I want to get your take on that, Tony. Is there any truth that the New Zealand quake, the Japan quake, and now this other big quake that we're having over in China, we had El Salvador last night, is this all down to CERN? Are they really doing this?
No. You have to look at the frequency of the earthquakes, and I don't mean the waveform frequency. I'm talking about how often, mathematically, the repetitiveness of it. These are too sparsely apart. They're too far apart in time, not just in physicality, but they're not happening frequently enough to be attributable to the activities at CERN, and certainly not to the Awake. The Awake is just being calibrated. It's not really doing much of anything. They have a few beams, but that's it. But yeah, there's a lot of people that still want to beat the drum that CERN's responsible for all these earthquakes. Now, when you and I first started talking many months ago, there were a lot more frequent earthquakes in terms of the time frame between them that were in the 4 to 6 range. And we could see a definitive time-based link between the activities of the startup of CERN and its collisions, moving up to 13 tera-electron volts, that were triggering smaller quakes, and a lot of them in a series, in a sequence. But these significantly large quakes that are sparsely in the timeline, separated from one another, are not attributable to the consistent operation now of both the Large Hadron Collider itself and the linear accelerator Awake. If you could make the correlation to them, then you would see 7.0s and bigger on a consistent basis. The first question I have for you, Kev, is what was the depth of this present earthquake in Tajikistan or in China? If it is at or near 10 kilometers in depth, then that is the hallmark, the fingerprint of HAARP.
Well, I can tell you, Tony, that on USGS, the original initial quake, which is logged here as a 6.6, interesting numbers there, was 12.6 kilometers deep. And the aftershocks that I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 of, and they're all of a magnitude 4 or higher, oh, surprise, surprise, 10 kilometers deep.
Yeah, there you go. So that's my, first way that I parse these quakes out is to look at the depth, because that is a classic fingerprint of HAARP.
And there you go, folks. Look for the depth. The depth in this is the key. When you see that 10 kilometer range, which I was showing you there, comes up quite frequently, 10 kilometers Chile, 10 kilometers Prince Edward Isles, 10 kilometers Afghanistan. You can keep coming down. They're still all there. That is the optimum distance or depth that HAARP operates at. Heats it up, stresses it, stimulates it, snap, crack, boom, bada bing, bada boom. Earthquake happens. Why do they do it? Because they can. This is the kind of warfare we're in now. The UN had a weather weapons treaty back in the 70s. So if you're sitting there criticising me or thinking I'm mad, go and have a word with them. They obviously appreciate the fact that there are weather weapons out there. Now, why do they do something like this here? Why would they hit California, Kev? I don't know. Could it be, though, that they have been expecting some really big one off the Californian coast? It's long overdue, right? By stimulating certain areas on fault lines, can they transfer the energy away? Can they actually dodge the bullet more till they are ready to have the massive earthquake so they can roll in as the saviors? Order out of chaos. big money as well when you're hitting countries with earthquakes. You know, big money to be made rebuilding countries. You can cripple governments that way. This is the world we are living in. But thoughts and prayers out to everyone, luckily, who dodged the bullet in California. We will watch this space. I'll be on the Kev Baker show tonight. I'll be asking Johnny Whistles all about this. We'll be getting into lots of fake news as well. But for now, folks, I will let you get back to your day, and I'll see you over on Truth Frequency Radio tonight from 11 p.m. in the UK